Hi, I'm Naoto. I'm the sharpening nerd at Knifewear. I'm going to sharpen a Yanagiba today, and I'm gonna do it as comprehensive as possible. But don't worry, if you follow the step, you can do it at home as well. So, single bevel knives are these traditional Japanese kitchen knives that are commonly used by many Japanese chefs. They're constructed by the bevel on one side and flat on the other. Because of this construction, you have to sharpen it quite a bit different from other regular double bevel knives. So we have this line here called shinogi, and there is an edge at the end. This whole flat area is called kiriha. On the back end, instead of it's entirely flat, there is a little bit of concavity in the middle and flat uraoshi along the edge and the spine. So what I'm going to do is to sharpen the bevel and the back uraoshi and the finish with that tiny bit of edge right here. These are all tools that I like to use. I do a lot of sharpening for customers, so I do have a lot of specific stones for specific purposes. Don't worry, I will point out what stones you should grab for your own sharpening. First off, this is Naniwa Diamond Stone 400 grit. This is great stone to grind the bevel off pretty fast. Second, next, the Sharpening Glass 500 grit. This is equivalent for the Naniwa Diamond 400, but it is much more affordable. And for those who doesn't have to grind that much of stone with the diamond stone, this is a great option. Naniwa Hibiki 1000 grit. This real hard stone will give you really good idea where you're sharpening and make the bevel nice and flat. This is Knifewear 1000 grit. This is actually one of my favorite stones. This is nice and soft, so it blends all the scratches really nicely and pretty affordable. Naniwa Superstone 3000 grit. This is also really nice soft stone, and it will give you very good Kasumi polish, which is to polish that the core edge very nice and shiny and the cladding steel little nice and foggy. Also, this is great stepping stone to get that polish very nice. Naniwa Hibiki 6000 grit. This is the stone that I will use primarily to check the straightness of the back of the uraoshi. Knifewear 4000 grit. This is one of my favorite stones to put the last edge, or some people call it secondary edge, on that knife. Lastly but not least, this is Knifewear 8000 grit. I like to use this because I'm sharpening a Yanagiba. Primarily reason for Yanagiba is to cut the raw fish. So I want to make the edge as smooth as possible. So this is my go-to stone to get that extra polish on the edge. What you need to have is either regular truing stone for all stones, or I like to use diamond plate to true the stone. Make sure all these stones are nice and flat before you use them. I also use the stone holder. I like to use this spring-loaded one so that I can change the stone quite easily. If you're gonna do just regular sharpening at home, you can grab Knifewear stone holder like this as well. And also the last deburring tool, I like to use the paddle strop. Here's what you need to do this at home. Knifewear 220, Knifewear 1000, Knifewear 4000, Knifewear 8000. Truing stone, stone holder, paddle strop, and Nagura stone. Making sure the knife is nice and straight and all the uraoshi parts touches on the stone. Otherwise, when you're sharpening the bevel part, you will be sharpening unevenly. Before I start the restoration, I wanted to protect the handle from getting yucky, so I put a little bit of plastic wrap on. So first off, I'm going to make sure this knife is in good condition. For that, I'm going to use this Naniwa Hibiki 6000 grit. So this is flattening process to make this stone very flat. I like to bevel the edge as well so that it doesn't break off as easy. And sometimes, believe it or not, this stone can cut you. How I test the straightness of the knife is to put the knife flat on the stone, then move it tiny bit back and forth to see if all edges will touch on the stone. That means because stone is really flat, if the edge touches on the stone completely, that means it's flat. So like this. So you can see this part here on the uraoshi, it's got a little more foggy finish here, where if you look at the tip, it remains a little shiny part, which is actually from the previous sharpening. So you can watch my video on how to straighten your blade, but what I'm going to do today is just to apply the pressure where it needs to be, bend it back, then gently pull. Then check. As you can see now, it's pretty consistent fogginess or the polish from the heel to the edge. This means knife is nice and straight. So sharpening a not straight knife can mean that there is a high spot and low spot on the bevel. That means you're actually sharpening very inconsistently. Next step is to grab core stone. In this case, I'm going to grab this Naniwa Diamond 400 grit. So first off, I'm going to sharpen the whole bevel. In order to do that, you just put the bevel flat down on the stone and apply the light pressure. The goal of this stone is to remove enough steel off from the bevel to create nice flat bevel on the kiriha part. I love this stone because it cuts the steel really fast. It doesn't leave deep scratches like other diamond stones like the flattening stone. As you can see, I move my other finger, pressing finger, just along the back and trailing back, right? This could be very difficult when you're learning. So what you could do is do by sections. Do one section, move it, do the other, move it, the other. It doesn't matter which way you actually start, just to make sure that you are grinding about the same amount of steel as possible. In order to tell if it's done, you can feel the burr from the back side of the knife. So another key point of the single bevel sharpening is that there is a little bit myth that this bevel is completely flat. There's always 3-dimension going on. So there is one that has a taper from where it touches the handle towards the tip. It gradually tapers it down. Therefore, in order to keep this bevel nice and straight, you would actually have to change the angle. So the angle that's been sharpened at the heel and tip is different. It twists almost. So in order to attain that, I change my finger position on the back. At the tip, I put the pressure around where the shinogi is. And as I come down to the heel, as you can see, it trails down, and at the heel, my pressure point is right at the edge. So this diagonal line, if you actually apply the pressure like this on this diagonal line, you'll be able to keep the nice torsion. Because this is the primarily first stone, to create the shape I want, I press quite a bit. Okay, the scale magically appeared. So what I would probably gonna have to do is put this one on here. That's what probably he meant. And reset. I don't think it's good to have the water, but let's see. This is the pressure probably like, oh here! Ah, it's about 3 kilograms of force. So I press around 3 kilos. Because it tapers it down, and this tip actually tapers this way. It narrows it too. So in order for this knife to touch on the stone, like if I'm adding the pressure right here, this part is not touching on the stone here. No. So what I'm going to do is apply the pressure on the same spot, but on the handle, I do raise it a little bit, just enough that the edge of the knife touches. Because this is the first stone, I want to sharpen and create the bevel that I like. If you grind the one side of the knife enough, this side of the metal will start to hang onto the other side. You can feel them by lightly running your finger on the back of your knife. Once we've raised the bar along the whole length of the edge, we can move on to the next step. Next, I'm going to use the Sharpening Glass 500. This is only 100 grit difference from what I was using previously, but it's going to make this scratches little more finer. You think the difference between the 100 grit is not that much of a difference, but you will see them visually. You can see the big difference from 400 grit to 500 grit. If you're sharpening at home and don't have this stone, you can skip the step and move on to deburring. So before I go on to the other stone, I'm going to quickly debar this knife. It's pretty much same as what you were doing on checking the back of the knife. Don't use anything really coarse to debar, since I'll explain later, but the back of the knife is very thin piece of steel. If you over grind them, you lose that hard core steel. So what I'm going to do is grab fine stones like this is 6,000 grit, then do the few strokes. Apply the pressure. I bet this is lighter than 3 kilos. Few strokes, Make sure all the burrs are gone. Just press down flat. Naniwa Hibiki 1000 grit. This stone's great, it's really nice and hard. This will make sure the bevel that I was sharpening is nice and flat and the shape that the ideal for the Yanagiba. I do it very similar to what I was doing, or the same. Little less pressure though, if you're using the scale, probably 2.5 kilos maybe? A little less actually. Remember, when I was talking about the little torsion on the bevel, I would explain what happens if you sharpen this bevel at the same angle all the way. Because this knife has the slight taper at the spine, little thicker here, and tapers it down towards the tip. If you sharpen the same angle as, say, here, at the tip, what can happen is this bevel line will actually start to come up quite a bit on the heel. So as if you keep the angle on the heel and sharpen all the way, it will make this bevel a lot narrower than this is. So this way is the best way to keep the shape of the Yanagiba as well the function of Yanagiba. What that means is that when you're slicing down the fish, it will get a little bit more fatter at the heel, but release point is going to be so much smoother. This here, you see the line here, right? This line. So this is the line, right? Right, this here, it changed the angle. So I just drew it on the knife, since I'm sharpening it later. By using the hard stone, it shows how it torsions. So it goes at the tip, it sharpens at a little bit lower angle, and here it's a little bit more higher angle. And you can see them by using a really hard stone like Hibiki 1000. So that step was a little bit more nerdy, or I guess you can call it professional step. You don't really have to go through that particular step, because what I'm going to do next is to use the same grit but substantially softer. So it blends all the scratches that I made with the previous stones. This is Knifewear 1000. Don't forget to chew your stones. Knifewear 1000, nice and soft stone that blends those lines very nicely. The pressure will be substantially lighter. This here is Naniwa Superstone 3000. This is Naniwa Superstone 3000 grit. This is really nice. It's nice and soft. After I blended it, this will make the edge very nice and shiny. As you can see, or as you can hear, it's so much quieter. And you don't have to put a lot of pressure when you're using on very fine stone like this. So for the polish, this is what I like to stop. You could definitely go a little bit more finer, like 6,000, 8,000, 10,000. Some people go overboard all the way up to 30,000 grit stone that we have on the sharpened glass. This is really practical finish on the bevel, and I like the nice contrast between the little smokiness and the shininess. I actually have to finish with putting so-called Koba on it. The reason why is that as I was sharpening, I was just following the bevel, which sits around probably 8 degrees and the back is flat. So the edge itself is at the 8 degrees. That makes the edge really nice and sharp, but it makes it so fragile. Sometimes the steel is not strong enough to hold that 8-degree edge. Like if I press, you can see the knife, like the edge bends. Like by looking at the reflection. This is how I like to finish the bevel. For those of you who likes to get the mirror polish or much more finer polish, go for it. If you're the sushi chef who likes to cut up the fish like a aged fish, you may want to finish with little like a 4,000, 6,000 or 8,000 on the bevel so that it glides through those really nice fish. I have this stone, the Knifewear 4000 grit. Again, I'm just going to chew them quick. Then first, I'm going to deburr the back, as well as do a little bit more sharpening type of stuff on the back. Again, you do not want to use any coarser stone on the back than say 4000 grit stone, because you do not want to remove or grind all the steels on the back. Then, after I remove the burr, what I'm going to do is to give this guy a good edge. That means I'm going to sharpen or give the good angle, like 20 degrees. Then do a few strokes like this. This is called, some people call it Koba, some people call it micro bevel, some people call it itoba, which means a thread bevel. So that this itoha or the Koba is going to be so small, so it's almost like a hemming a piece of fabric because it's so thin that it could start to frail. So this is like
protects the edge.
Protects the edge from breaking it. Then I do take the burr off again.
I think the googly eyes on the water bottle was like our best production decision yet.
That's what they pay me for.
Next step is going to be my final stone step. Knifewear 8000 grit. This gives the extra fineness for the micro bevel. Because I primarily use this for raw fish, I don't want any dragging action for a raw piece of fish because it can tear up. So I'm going to finish this with very, very fine stone like Knifewear 8000 so that it glides them like a silk. Set the angle at a 20 degrees. You don't want to set this at the 15 degrees either because you're sharpening the back flat. So you want to set this angle a little bit higher than you would sharpen for the double bevel knives because the back is gonna be completely flat. Just want to make sure it's nice and consistent when it comes to the polish level on the back. Going to use this other strop. So you want to strop it at the same angle as you're sharpening on the micro bevel, not the flat bevel. And flat back here. A few strokes so as the this will take, so stropping will take very fine micro burr at the end. Makes the edge really nice and fine. Let's test. Make sure it cuts nice and clean. This is just regular tissue paper. You roll it and slice them so that make sure there is no burr. If there is burr, it catches and it tears a little bit. I just made sure it cuts really nice and clean. I didn't put a lot of pressure because I don't want this edge to touch on the hard board that's not meant for cutting. Now we're done sharpening on this Yanagiba single bevel knife. Let's talk about common mistakes for people do for single bevel knife sharpening. 1. Over sharpens the back bevel of the knife. Even though if you sharpen the back bevel flat on the stone, if you over sharpen them, it will shorten the life of the knife. So single bevel knives are made with 2 pieces of steel. One very thin piece that becomes the edge, that's a hard steel, and laminate with a softer steel on the outside, which is actually quite thick. If you sharpen the backside too much, you will lose this steel that becomes the edge. Then the knife is no longer useful at all. So don't over sharpen the backside. Uraoshi, this flat shiny part, shouldn't exceed any more than 2 millimeters. 2. Some people do sharpen the back like a double bevel knife. That's a huge no. As I said, they have the very thin, hard steel for the edge. Very thin. So if you bevel it from the back side, you will lose that much of the steel. And in order to bring it back or make it to the original condition, we'll have to grind so much more steel off. Make sure you sharpen the bevel, then the micro bevel. Otherwise, it will make the edge too thick. It doesn't slide into the food as easy. And one of the common mistakes I've seen for the single bevel knife sharpening is at the tip. Make sure you tilt it upwards like I showed you earlier so that you do not have the edge looks like a bird's beak. Because if you're sharpening on the one spot too long, you start to lose this part more than the tip. Tilt it upwards so that you are actually sharpening whole entire blade. When it comes to sharpening other single bevel knives like Deba and Usuba, principle is very similar or the same. Sharpen the bevel, backside is flat, So especially when you're sharpening Usuba, make sure everything is nice and flat, including stones, bevel, and the edge. For the Deba sharpening, it's slightly different. So when it comes to the Deba, because it's how it constructed, the taper from the heel towards the tip is much more substantial. Therefore, the torsion is much bigger. The tip part is sharpened at lower angle than the heel. Also, although I said do not ever sharpen the back with the angle, some people do put the small bevel on 1/3 of the Deba as a double bevel. It could be done by just a very light stroke on a 4000 grit stone. That becomes so subtle that you won't even see, but adds extra strength to the heel of the blade. Therefore, when you cut it into some little bit more harder bone fish like sea bream, you could do that without worrying too much about chipping the blade. Because the Deba is primarily used for butchering or filleting fish, I tend to finish this at around 2000 grit at the edge level, so that it grabs the meat a little bit nicer and also gives you a little bit more strength on the edge as well. So it's not as delicate because it will hit the little bit of bone. I've heard some people actually saying finishing 8000 grit on the Deba is actually not going to work because it loses a lot of teeth. So there you have it. There are a lot of information, but if you have any questions, just pop that in the comment section below. If you want to learn more about knife sharpening, check out my sharpening playlist. Thanks for watching.